in here and talk a little bit about the management decisions and styles.
One of the things Tom reminded me is
Yes.
that you have a video on one of Erica Zavaletta's, the thing that I posted on the website or on the Google Drive for you guys. There is one with Nadia.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
So if you need to review some of this stuff.
Perfect.
I would say of all the videos, it's the best.
Oh wow.
It's informationally dense.
Awesome. No pressure.
Are there a lot of
No, I
weeds
was
though
so
around
glad to
here?
see- I was so glad to see them use the Humboldt undercut.
Oh
and
yeah.
keep the stump so low to the ground. I just love
That's
that.
my guy.
That's where it's at.
That's awesome.
The
So
Humboldt undercut.
yeah, so
So when you have really valuable timber, you don't want to waste it on your cut. Take it out like that. So in Humboldt, they learned to do an undercut. So you'd save. These are huge trees.
Yeah.
So when you're cutting something this thick, you're going to throw that away? No.
yeah, you could see it here. So generally when you're doing when you're falling trees, the first thing you do is cut a wedge out of the side you want the tree to fall in. So this tree was directed this way. And generally you're shooting for a slot. So it's likely this tree went right between, the younger trees in this grove right over here, right between like that Coast Live Oak and that Madrone. And so this cutting, so you're cutting the wedge, and if you were just like haphazardly potentially gonna waste some wood, you might cut that wedge and then make the back cut from the bottom, so the wedge is actually out of your first log, which is really, valuable. This is actually gonna be, the biggest segment of the tree. So you can see right here, this wedge came up from the bottom and then flat on the top, and then the back cut was at the top of that. And my timber fallers have to make stumps less than 12 inches tall on the uphill side of the tree to get, there's a bunch of reasons for that. Maximum utilization of the super valuable, redwood that's been growing for 100 years is one of them. But also, because this is a single tree selection managed redwood forest, it was clear cut about 120 years ago, and this particular area, any given spot you could ask me and I could probably pull out, like this particular spot's had 3 selective harvests. The last one here was in 2006.
How many trees did they take?
Yes, so, and the approximate proportion of trees over 12 inches, it would be about 20 to 25% of the trees
Okay.
over 12 inches.
What is, just to get an idea, because I just don't know.
Yeah.
Like say this tree is maybe, 80 years old. What would that value on today's market be about?
Yeah, so that's a whole, I will talk about that. So what, I wanted to finish my thought about this, so I will get into the economics in a second until you guys shut me up. Another reason for having low stumps is we want to manage this selectively in perpetuity. And so if you had really high stumps, anything a tree hits when it falls has the potential to, cause a crack, cause a breakage. Sometimes if you fall these trees over somewhat of a belly, like, some kind of a swale in the landscape, you could slab the whole thing and pretty much waste it. And so having these things, low so that they're not big obstacles all over the landscape, it's part of the design for being able to manage. And I mean, I consider it sustainable, but there's question out there. We've done it selectively 3 times since the clear cut. Wood is recruiting back at a more rapid rate because we cut about 80% or less of the growth between one harvest and the next. The harvests are about every 15 or 20 years in this, in this system, and what else do I have to say about that? Many of the trees that are removed of the 25% are from the upper size classes, because in the working forest, you're cutting some of the dominant trees to release the trees below it and around it. And in that way, I pretty much look at the next tree like, you know, this is going to transition into that larger size class between this harvest and the next, you know, so you kind of look at it like generations, or you want to have enough stocking at the end of every harvest that you've got trees well positioned to release and actually put on a whole bunch of growth between one harvest and the next. Let's talk about some of the nitty-gritty economics.
One question about the stumps, Nadia.
Yes.
I've read that stumps are not actually dead, but
Right.
that when in microsomial communities, they found that actually the trees surrounding are actually feeding the stumps. And sometimes stumps can be like decades old, and we think they're dead, but they're not.
Totally. And yes, so redwood is super complicated. And I mean, there are many coppice sprouting species in this forest. Tan oak, madrone, redwood, you know, are all, they will all come back with sprouts when they're cut. Really interesting research into redwood genetics is happening for the last few years, and really picking up at Save the Redwoods League. And you can find articles online. They've actually decoded the redwood genome. And redwood is hexaploid, so they have 6 sets of chromosomes, so they're ridiculously complex. And you know, when I started working with redwood, they're just so fascinating. And we used to think that all of the sprouts around a particular redwood stump were clones, and you know that this is like one organism.
Yeah.
But in fact, you know, you get sprouting from root networks, and so all of the sprouts around a particular redwood stump, or all of the trees in any particular redwood grove or clump, are not necessarily clones, because they are linked with a mycorrhizae, you know, underground. And so you can get this situation in the redwood forest where some of these trees in the understory, similar to the stumps like you were pointing out, are actually sinks so they are being supported by the photosynthesis. That's one of the ways that they're able to hang out and be so crazy shade tolerant, is because they get actually a lot of their resources from their big neighbor next door that they are tapped into. Yeah.
Is that the same case with albinism in redwoods?
Albinism is even, so I don't totally understand what's going on with albinism. We'll see some today. If you want, we'll stop and, I've found about 35 albinos on this property. They're way more common than I think some people think they are.
I've seen one. I thought it was
The
rare.
ones that have both.
Yeah, so what the albinos that I find are always, you know, associated with a tree that's fully green. And usually it's a sprout at the base. But sometimes it's a ball in the middle of the canopy.
One in Scotts Creek like that.
Yeah. They, you know, there's a guy who researches them from Davis who thinks that they have to do with increased toxicity. They're definitely more common in the south end of the range, where redwoods are more stressed for a variety of reasons. I don't totally know why they are what they are. Maybe you guys know better.
I remember from reading, I forget his name, but I've sent him some GPS.
Donald or something.